This is Paul McGUIRE, and once again you're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. I have had to live through so many fires in Southern California on a regular basis for the last, I don't know, in this location for the last 10 years accelerated, going back 20 years, okay? And so I'm used to living in fires, I'm used to living in earthquakes. This ministry, by the way, the Paul McGUIRE Report, Paradise Mountain Church, was birthed. It was birthed because of the Northridge earthquake. At that time, we were living in a different location, and there were two epicenters. And of course, most of you know, epicenter is the primary explosive thrust of an earthquake. So usually there's one epicenter, sometimes there's two epicenters. But in the Northridge earthquake, the primary epicenter was in the Northridge area, but equally as powerful and in some ways more dangerous was the area that I lived in at the time. At that time, I lived in Santa Clarita, up in the mountains, and we woke up at like 4:30 a.m. in the dark, and it literally sounded like a locomotive train was going full speed ahead. And it had smashed through the bottom floor of our two-story house. And all I can remember is we had to survive so many earthquakes, but what was unique about the Northridge earthquake was that it was accompanied by the loudest, most deafening, ear-splitting sound I've ever heard in my entire life. Now, people said, well, that sound you heard, Paul, was the tectonic plates scraping, hundreds of miles of underground tectonic plates scraping each other. And when they scrape each other in a like a Northridge earthquake, it makes that loud. There's no way to describe it unless you've lived through it. Now, I lived through a lot of earthquakes, and never, ever did I experience the deafening roar of tectonic plates. So, that was a turning point in the ministry. I had written a number of books like Who Will Rule the Future, Supernatural Faith in the New Age, Evangelizing the New Age, and other books. And they all dealt with Bible prophecy to one degree or another. But I must tell you that I did not have an overwhelming sense of immediacy regarding the fact that these were the signs of time, the signs of the times. I guess you could say I dismissed it as, these were the general signs of the times. These kinds of signs of the times that Christ talked about have been going on for, thousands of years. So what changed my perspective, what changed my outlook, because you see, almost everything I research, I'm always initially skeptical. People would think, well, Paul McGUIRE is not really skeptical, but I am. I can't think of a particular theory, a conspiracy theory, an investigation, or anything of any kind where I have not approached it initially when I examined it. Initially, when I would do research on it, my internal bias, and it is a bias, my internal bias was always to say, this is circumstantial. There's nothing new in this, or this is an exaggeration, or all the 101 kinds of rationalizations you can attribute to things. Yeah, I believed in Bible prophecy. Yeah, I believed it was the signs of the times. But there's a difference between believing in the signs of the times and having that red emergency alert sense that this is it, baby. These are the signs of the times. So our house shook violently. The house shook so violently during the Northridge earthquake that I couldn't believe it was still standing, because you can feel the structure was heaving back and forth violently, and you're anticipating the house to start splintering into pieces. And that's not far-fetched, because the person who lived in the house directly next to us, when we looked at the damage of their house and many of our neighbors' houses, the damage to the house of the people who lived directly next to us, when we walked through the front door, we immediately saw it must have been a 3 to 4 to 5 foot split. It looked like a 4 to 5 foot chasm split. So when you looked down into the depths of the chasm, where one part of the house had separated from the other part of the house, making it like a 4 to 5 foot gap in their house. And you could, as far as you could see, and you know, this is probably maybe 100 feet you could see down with the available light, and you couldn't see any further because there wasn't enough light to illuminate the depths of the chasm. So what I'm trying to say is their house split in two. Now think about your house splitting in two and surviving it. Other neighbors had their houses split in two and different things like that. Well, I thank God that our house didn't split in two. So what happened was, I'm going to consolidate this story. What happened was my wife, our kids were infants. They could barely crawl up the stairs to the second floor. Twins and 1 year-old. So the kids are infants, okay? And my wife, with superhuman strength that comes when mega doses of adrenaline are firing through your body, your survival mechanism kicks into your neurological biochemical system, and you're as a movie title, we made a science fiction movie together a number of years earlier called Wired to Kill. Well, when your biochemistry is altered and your adrenaline is firing and your neurological chemicals are pumping through your body, you could lift up a truck, for crying out loud, because the most precious thing in your entire life are your kids. And my wife grabbed all 3 kids at once, which normally I don't think she could have done. And she grabs them. I'm on my way up the stairs to grab them, but she's operating in some kind of superhuman strength mode. And she bolts outside with the 3 kids. I'm following her. Sadly to say, I wasn't leading her. I'm following her. And what happens is all the lights that we could see, for as far as you could see, went out. Massive power grid collapse. No lights anywhere. We live on the end of a cul-de-sac. And so all of our neighbors began to get out of their houses and walk out into the street, and they began to congregate on the long pavement of the cul-de-sac where our house was at the end of the street. And they start to come up to me. They know I write books and stuff. And, you know, it's amazing what your neighbors know about you that you didn't tell them, but they know about it anyway. So my neighbors, many of them are in the entertainment business, and they're asking me stuff like this, quote, Paul, because they see what's around them, darkness. The only thing that worked, and you could only get a couple of channels on your car radio, just a couple of AM or FM channels. And they began to come up to me, a whole bunch of them at different incremental moments, and they would say, Paul, looking at the carnage, they said, Paul, are these the signs of the times that Jesus Christ talked about? I didn't have to, you know, get on a bandwagon and hand out leaflets and blow a bullhorn. I didn't have to say anything. I had never told them in some mechanical way, you know, what kind of books I wrote. But they all knew anyway, and they all asked me the same question repetitively over and over again. Paul, are these the signs of the times that Jesus Christ talked about? That was the first thing that came to their mind. These people didn't go to church. They were agnostics, atheists, Jewish, unbelieving Christians, but they all asked me the same question. And the questions kept coming at me for quite a long time. Paul, are these the signs of the times that Jesus Christ talked about? I would go to like a Kinko's copy shop or a store, and I didn't know anybody in the store. I didn't know any of the customers. And for some odd reason, people would walk up to me that I'd never met before in my life, and they would ask me the question, totally out of the blue, totally not rehearsed. I had no bumper sticker or Jesus Saves pin. There was no way they could have identified me as a Christian in terms of my visual appearance, okay? And they would ask me in stores, just out of the middle of nowhere, like a donut shop and stuff, Paul, no, they didn't say Paul because they didn't know my name. Excuse me. They simply said to me, out of the blue, they looked at me out of the blue and they said, are these the signs of the times that Jesus Christ talked about? Okay, so did they adequately fix this or prepare for emergencies? No. In the short clip I shot of this, it looked like the gates of hell had opened and this inferno of dark smoke is coming at my house. And I don't know, we don't know, so we're packing the emergency stuff. Okay, we're packing the emergency stuff, which is family photos and stuff that's important. Nothing else is important. And many fires have come right up to my house in the last 10 years. So the winds were blowing strong, and I was looking at the dark, black, ominous clouds billowing as if a nuclear weapon had gone off. It was ominous beyond description, and nobody knows what's going to happen because nobody knows the direction of the wind. If the wind blows in one direction, where I live, at the town where I live, will be engulfed in flames, like what you've been seeing on TV. If where I live, if the wind happens to blow in, let's say, a favorable direction, pushing the flames and the fire and the winds away from us, then there's a very strong possibility we will survive. So it's a day-to-day situation, and nobody knows the outcome. And you realize in that moment, like many of you have had to realize in different moments in your life, you come to the realization, which I've come to many times in my life, that my life, my wife's life, our lives as a family, the life of this ministry, Paradise Mountain Church International, the Paul McGUIRE Report, all of our lives collectively are literally in the hands of God. And anybody who has not come to the place yet, if you have not come to the place yet where you fully realize that your hands are in the hands of God, that your life is in the hands of God, then let me just shoot straight from the heart to you and tell you you're a fool. You're a flat-out crazy fool, and you ought to wake up. If it doesn't happen now, it will happen a number of times during your lifetime. It happens to everybody, where you have the realization that ultimately your hands are, life is not in your hands in power and control. Get over it. That's a delusion. In fact, that's one of the root delusions that is the primary causative factor for America in the nightmare that we have entered into. This collective delusion rooted in pride, rooted in man's fallen nature, this delusion, this Luciferian deception, this satanic deception that somehow you and I are in control of our own lives and destiny. Yeah, we are to a little bit, but ultimately you come to the realization that your life and the life of the lives of the people you love, etc., etc. Look, wake up. They're in the hands of God. And America forgot this a while back, and you know it and I know it. And the root cause for all of America's problem, I don't care what the problem is, the root cause of all of America's problems is the fact that America has forgotten who its ultimate source is. The source of everything, the source of food, the source of military protection, the source of protection from terrorism, the source of protection from inferno fires and Holocaust, you name it. Whatever you need protection from, God Almighty is our source. And so you come to the realization that your hand and the lives of the people you love, it's in the hands of God. That's life lesson number 101. Most of you know that lesson because you've had to live it. But many of you, and not so much many of you, but many of the people you know, they haven't figured out yet that they're not in control of their lives. God is. And it doesn't matter how much money you have, how much power you have, ultimately your life is in the hands of God.